If true, this absolutely changes everything for the Toronto Raptors, as Toronto has been interested in acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo, the superstar from the Milwaukee Bucks, for years now at this point, and reports have now circulated that Giannis is interested in joining the Toronto Raptors as well. And the Raptors, as we've discussed in recent weeks, have a strong enough package, have a strong enough asset pool to make that blockbuster trade with the Milwaukee Bucks something that they'd realistically accept, because of course this will be done via trade. And now, if this report ends up being solid, being on solid grounds, the Toronto Raptors are now in an absolutely amazing position to acquire the superstar out of Milwaukee. So we're going to break down what this report is, what it means for the Toronto Raptors, and realistically what we should expect for a potential Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, because frankly, this is the most game-changing thing you can do, trading for a superstar. So we're going to dive into it all, but as I mentioned, folks, you want to stay up to date with daily Toronto Raptors coverage. News is dropping like wildfire, and you're part of the 52% that haven't hit the subscribe button just yet. Make sure you guys hit that sub button, because we're delivering daily Toronto Raptors coverage. And honestly, feels like there's rumors, reports, and now official reports dropping on Giannis Antetokounmpo, because we've been on Giannis watch for the last while now at this point. I've dusted off the old Giannis Antetokounmpo graphics, because the Raptors have for years now at this point been interested, been on a mission to acquire the Milwaukee Bucks star, and for good reason. The man is an absolute monster. I mean, we could just take a look at his stats, right? Giannis, of course, 30 points per game, 12 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.2 blocks, 1 steal per game. Like, Giannis at 30 years old is still one of the most domineering presence in the entire NBA. So some people are saying, oh, Giannis not the fit, whatever. If Giannis is available at a reasonable price, this is a guy you go full tilt after. But what has changed? Because I made a video this morning about some of the minor reports that dropped, coming from guys like Rich Paul saying, you look at Toronto, who have young assets, a big market, he would be huge there. You have that coming from Rich Paul, of course, probably the most locked-in guy in the NBA. He's not a reporter, he's an agent, but definitely is most tapped in with all of this information. You have Kendrick Perkins making subtle, messages. Of course, Kendrick Perkins is not, Shams breaking news, but he said, don't sleep on Toronto. You have him to watch Masai. You go over there with Giannis, Scottie Barnes, RJ Barrett. You give up Ingram Quickley some picks. We know Toronto acts when they see some daylight. You look at the Kawhi Leonard situation, he could take over a whole country, right? Giannis would be the man up here in Toronto. But again, these were kind of minor reports. We broke them down, we discussed it, but after the lottery, there was a lot of people looking at this Raptors position saying, hey, we would have had a lot more leverage to blow away the competition in a Giannis trade if this team, had a Cooper Flag sort of at the helm, or even one of those top 4 picks. But so I was a little disenchanted, unhopeful about this, but then things completely changed with this new report that's basically been taking Raptors land by storm. So what's going on with this? Essentially, 2 teams have emerged as the destinations of interest for the 2-time MVP, and they are the Toronto Raptors as well as the Brooklyn Nets. Now, you look at this, and why is this game changing? Because the Toronto Raptors can put together a better package than the Brooklyn Nets. That's the first thing. We'll take a look a little bit deeper in all this, because if you're not familiar, Giannis, according to Shams, is not making firm decisions, but for the first time in his career, he's open-minded about whether his best fit is remaining in Milwaukee or playing elsewhere, league sources have told ESPN. So there's an expectation Giannis will be traded this offseason, but basically, Giannis being in the mix here, because the Toronto Raptors, of course, have had the interest in Giannis for years at this point. But if we compared our pool in terms of assets that we could give up, again, if Scottie Barnes involved, I believed that the Raptors could compete with any team across the NBA. The Spurs, the Mavericks now, who aren't going to trade Cooper Flag at this point, but the Rockets with a bunch of draft picks, the Nets who have a bunch of draft picks. These different teams, I believe the Raptors, if Scottie Barnes is willing to be, or the Raptors are willing to throw Scottie Barnes in a trade package, then this deal was reasonable, possible, or anything out there along those lines. But now, if Giannis only has a 2-team list, if he, again, we need some more solid reports at Scoopb. I've met Scoopb. He's definitely a well-connected guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not Shams. He's not Brian Windhorst or something along those lines, but definitely a guy that is tapped in around the NBA. If the Toronto Raptors are in a position where Giannis has that 2-team list, because essentially why he wants to come to Toronto at this point. Essentially, his eyes are on the East Coast, and it's more than just basketball decision. Brooklyn, Toronto are on his radar. Why? legacy, market control. Word is Giannis wants influence on rosters, on recruiting, in the city's more culture. The Nets, they're loaded with cap space, picks, flexibility, a blank canvas. The Toronto Raptors, they have a global brand, international reach, and a young core in Scottie Barnes. And it isn't just about hoops, it's about empire. So, there's also the fact that, we discussed this. I recorded a video earlier. This is getting replaced in the time slot. So my video that was recorded earlier, it's going out tomorrow, is, basically on how the Toronto Raptors have a wide open opportunity in the Eastern Conference now at this point. The East is absolutely just mind-blowingly open. And the Raptors have a ton of talent out here on this roster, but we look at it, and I'll summarize what I have in this video coming out tomorrow, but the Celtics, no Jason Tatum. They're going to have to deal away some players as well, their draft picks. Their cap situation over the second apron is super messy. So expect no Tatum next season. Expect Jrue Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis or both to be gone. The Cavs, they just had an absolute flame out in the playoffs for the third year in a row. Don't be surprised if there's some changes there and we don't have that 60-win team that was there for Cleveland this season. Of course, the Pacers, the Knicks are still very solid. The Pistons are going to get better. But outside of that, man, the Bucks are in a nasty situation with, this Giannis situation, with Damian Lillard's Achilles injury and then Kyle Kuzma giving a bunch of money there. The Eastern Conference is wide open. The only two teams that I think really teams are fearful of next season are the Knicks, the Pacers, and maybe the Cavs, maybe the Orlando Magic, but all teams of the Raptors, given their current roster, given as is without even Giannis or anything like that, are in a position to make a major jump in the Eastern Conference next season. You add Giannis to that mix, you add him in terms of a trade package, that is huge. And now there's only these two teams out there in the East. So Giannis wants to come East. Of course, the Nets have a bunch of draft picks, but the Raptors have a bunch of draft picks as well. They have their own draft picks. I don't imagine the Nets are going to give up 10 first-round picks for Giannis, given the fact that their roster right now just sucks. So if you give away all your draft assets and then on top of it, all the salary matching players, they are going to be abysmal. The Raptors have a reasonable amount of draft capital to actually make one of these trades go down. And then on top of it, right, they have some young pieces that can help the Bucks win now because they don't have much of their control of their draft picks in the future either. So maybe a 3-team deal with the Pelicans could work out or something along those lines. But basically, you have these players in terms of, Immanuel Quickley, who match salary. You have an RJ Barrett who can match salary. I think there's a reasonable possibility of getting this deal done without Scottie Barnes in the package. And frankly, some people look at that and they're like, oh, that's stupid. Why would you keep Scottie when you have Giannis? They're similar players and stuff. If you think about the defense on a team with Scottie Barnes and Giannis Antetokounmpo out there as your forwards, and then Jakob Poeltl as your center, that is by far the best defensive forward dynamic duo, whatever the heck you want to call it, out there in the NBA. You can maybe make an argument that Cooper Flag, AD, and then Derek Lively are there as well. But frankly, I would not be betting against the Toronto Raptors in that scenario with Scottie Barnes, Giannis, and then Jakob Poeltl out there in the mix. And then also Mobo, who could be in there for switchable D. Again, Chris Boucher might be in the mix then again at that point. They're Ulrich Shamshay out there off the bench for that future squad. I mean, that defensively is absolutely ferocious. We know how high IQ basketball players all three of those guys are. So even though the floor space will be weird, it's something you can look at. You have Gradey Dick, you have Jacoby Walter, you have shooters out here on this team in terms of making some stuff happen, of course. So it's you're going to have to part with two of IQ, Scottie, Barrett. You're not going to be able to trade Brandon Ingram over the offseason. So that's something we can kind of write off here now at this point. But frankly, it's getting real, folks. It's getting real. It's getting real with these new reports. And, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest updates with everything that's going on with the situation. But if Giannis wants to come to Toronto, his only two teams are the Nets and the Raptors, I'd bet my money. I don't actually sports bet, but I'd make those internal bets. I'm betting with hope that Giannis will end up being on the Toronto Raptors. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. You guys best think of this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.